Hey everybody, thanks again for coming back and watching the next installment. I want to start this video with just a real quick pop quiz, just a one question pop quiz. And the question is, what is the difference between a crash and a hard landing? And I will spare you the suspense and give you the answer. And the answer is, there is no difference between a crash and a hard landing when you're flying a helicopter. I want to give a quick wrap-up of where we left off last time at 3 flights. I'm now on 10, as the title indicates. So the 4th and 5th flights were in the backyard and were very, very successful. Nothing really to report there. Mostly just hovers and takeoff, land, hover, etc., etc. Not really much forward flight. I was a little bit intimidated to do much forward flight in the backyard, even though it's about 80 by 80, that's feet, where I'm flying. There's still some obstacles. There's a couple of horseshoe pits that have 3 foot by 6 foot backboards. So there's some obstacles in a couple of trees, some low-hanging branches. So it's difficult to really get move around a whole lot. So on the 6th flight, I decided to, there's just about a quarter of a block away, there's a grade school with a huge playground behind it. And so I walked over there and actually had a really great flight. The 6th flight was awesome. Did some slow forward flight and just, again, did some hovering, but overall just great. Everything worked just exactly like it was supposed to. On the 7th flight, I was invited to a barbecue at a friend's house, and he was asking about the helicopter, so I actually took the heli over there and flew it around a little bit and had kind of a shaky landing, and one of the rotor blades grazed a bench. No big deal, no damage done. On the 8th and 9th flights, well, let's see, the 8th flight, I was back in the backyard, just did some takeoffs, landings, hovers, nothing special, very uneventful. On the 9th flight, again, I was in the backyard and set it down rather hard on not very far into the battery charge, and actually the rotor blade grazed the tail boom and put about a 1 or maybe 2 degree bend in the tail boom right by the vertical tail fin, just right before it goes into the tail fin holder. And I was actually able to, I stopped, and then when I had some time, I very carefully straightened the tail boom. I probably could have flown with it as it was, but I didn't want to take the risk that it could cause some instability, so I just went ahead and fixed it. The 10th flight, again, I was in the backyard, and I was attempting some slow forward flight, which I probably really shouldn't have in the backyard. Like I said, even though it's quite an open space, there's not a whole lot of room. And it kind of got away from me, and it was headed for one of the horseshoe pit backboards, backstops. And it's 3 2x12 stacked on top of each other, so they're very heavy-duty backboards. They're not going to give at all. And so rather than risking running into it, I thought the safest thing to do, I was fairly low, obviously, and I was kind of increasing speed, so I thought the forward speed, and I thought the best thing to do would be to just shut down the rotors and just let it land on the ground. Well, at about 18 inches, I killed the motors completely, and the helicopter basically dropped from the height of about 18 inches. And there really wasn't much angle of attack. It was pretty well flat. The helicopter pretty much landed on the training gear squarely. However, due to the impact, the rotor blade hit the tail boom very hard. And this is the result of that impact. Now, don't freak out. I have actually disassembled the helicopter. And let me kind of run through what happened here. So one of the rotor blades, this one, in fact, the tail boom was like this, and the rotor blade came around and actually tried to go under the tail boom, is basically what it's trying to do. The blade flexed enough that it tried to go under the tail boom. So it put this nice little dog leg and actually a little bit of a twist. And you can actually see it's twisted. There's some lines there that indicate that it's been twisted. And ironically, it didn't break the blade. It kind of cracked the root of the blade a little bit. But what happened was when the helicopter came to rest, the rotor blade was about that angle. And what had happened was, whoops, I'll get that in a minute. The feathering shaft, which is what the blade holders, the blades like this, there's one on each side obviously, it's what the blade holders pivot on. And it is this little thing right here. It's just basically a steel tube that's threaded on either end. And the threads hold the blade holders on, but it actually does pivot. The blade holders actually do pivot so that it can change the pitch of the blade. But this was bent. I had to unbend it to get it out of the hub, which is the thing that it goes through. And so this required that I take off the fly bar, and in order to get off the fly bar, to take off the fly bar, I had to take off the paddle. And incidentally, this unscrews. If you ever have to take it off, it doesn't just slip off. It actually unthreads from the fly bar. So don't try to yank on it like I did, because it doesn't work. And then I had to take off the fly bar weights and the retainer that holds the fly bar, loosen the two retainers that holds the fly bar and the fly bar frame, slide the fly bar out, and take the whole thing apart. It was pretty complicated, more complicated than I would have thought. And while I was disassembling this piece, I thought that was my biggest problem, was the tail boom and the feathering shaft, or they call it the spindle in the manual. I looked down and noticed that the two halves of the frame had actually cracked. I thought the frame was more rigid than it actually turns out to be. This looks like expanded polystyrene or something like that. It actually flexes, and it's actually pretty fragile and apparently somewhat brittle. But how that happened was, at least I think, the torque from the rotor head sitting in there like that, and the opposite torque from the tail boom when it was hit. The rotor's going this way, and the tail boom is resisting it, so you actually get some torque on the frame, and it cracked the frame. When you crack the frame, you're disassembling the whole helicopter. So a cracked frame means a rebuild. That's not a good thing. So I actually have 5 parts that I need to replace: the frame, the tail boom, the feathering shaft. I bought new rotor blades, although I could probably fly with these. They look to have their structural integrity still intact, and they're not beat up. And then there's a small crack in the main gear. There's no way you could see it. I can barely see it with my naked eye. But and actually, I could probably continue to run this, but I ordered another one anyway. So I'm currently waiting for parts. So that's that. Those are the parts to the helicopter. Just an FYI, if you have to remove the fin and motor holder from the tail boom, it is impossible to get this connector out through the slot that's in the front end of the tail boom. It's too big. But what you can do is take a small screwdriver and actually press in the retaining tabs that they spring them down a little bit and actually remove the pins from the housing, from the socket housing. And when you do that, you're able to pull the pins through the hole in the tail boom and just take the motor out whole. Otherwise, you have to physically desolder the wires from the motor. It's much easier just to remove the pins. Just make sure that you've noted polarity. I have a picture of it so I can remember, but just so that you make sure you get the pins back in the same place they came from. Otherwise, the motor's going to turn the opposite direction and you're going to have a problem. So hopefully I've done minimal tweaking to the rotor head. I've tried to keep all of the adjustable linkages exactly in the position that they were. I've marked all the servos as to which servo they are so that I get them back in the same location. I haven't messed with the adjustable linkages on the servo, and hopefully everything will go back together with minimal adjustment. I have gotten a blade. I did order a blade balancer and a pitch gauge with my parts just in the event that I have to change any of those or have to adjust any of that. But hopefully everything will go back pretty close to where it was on the original model. So that's pretty much it. I'm not really looking forward to having to rebuild this. There's a lot of small parts, so make sure that you keep track of everything. The shims that are on this feathering shaft that go inboard, they're the most inboard piece other than the O-rings that go in the hub. They are amazingly thin. It would be very easy to lose those, and from what I've read, it's hard to believe that those would be that critical or important, but I guess apparently they are. So otherwise they wouldn't be there. That's pretty much it. I can't really think of anything else to note. Oh, make a note of if you ever have a crash where you have to disassemble the radio, make sure that you make note of where the servos and all the connectors go, because there's nothing in the book that gives you any indication of where those things go. It's probably a common setup, and if you're familiar with it, you know exactly where they go. But I didn't, so I made a diagram. And there's an exploded, no pun intended, parts diagram in the back that gives you the list of all the things so that you can, along with the part numbers and their names, so that you can order them when you need them. And actually, the exploded diagram looks pretty intimidating at first, but it's actually pretty handy and fairly easy to use. So I hope that everything will go back together with no problem. I probably won't get my parts for about 4 days because there's a weekend coming up, and so it's going to take me a while to get the parts. But once I have them back together, I'll post another video of my reassembly experience and see, so that you guys will know how difficult it was or how off the adjustments for the rotor head were. And again, I'm going to have to probably go through the whole trim setting routine again, undoubtedly, just to make sure that everything's as stable as it possibly can be. But anyway, it's a bummer. I was not at all impressed by my misfortune, but it's the way it is. You're going to crash them, so you got to get used to it. I think that's about it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll post again once I have this thing basically put back together.